Hello, and welcome to our special Real Sports Overtime on HBO.com. I'm Bryant Gumbel, and I'm joined by a longtime college basketball commentator Billy Packer, former Michigan football coach Rich Rodriguez, sports journalist Jason Whitlock, and former Ivy League Commissioner Jeffrey Orleans. We're here to continue our discussion of college sports and the NCAA, and to that end, let's begin by answering a few of your questions. I've got one here from a viewer named Michael, who says I'm paraphrasing a bit, says the NCAA is acting as an agent because it exerts power to produce an effect. As such, does the NCAA represent the colleges and universities, or does it represent the athletes?
It represents, it's the National Association of Colleges. That's what it is.
So it represents the colleges and universities?
Absolutely, and they wouldn't dispute that, certainly.
Absolutely.
So who's representing the athletes' interest in this?
Nobody official.
Nobody officially does that, but you know, the guy that should really start off representing the athlete is the coach. He's the guy that recruits the guy. He creates the association with the young guy before he comes to his university, and I think he has the ultimate responsibility for that kid's well-being, not only in the university, but after he gets out. And the man that, in my estimation, did the greatest job of that of any coach that I knew was Dean Smith. Dean Smith, you were a member of his family from the day that he first met you until the day you passed away. He knows your kids, he knows your grandkids, he knows their name, he knows their birthday, he knows if you graduated, and if you didn't, how do I get you back on track? He knows if you're out of work. Now, he's not positioned anymore to be able to do that, obviously. But during his tenure, and that's why I put him on a level, maybe in that respect, different than any other coach. Once you were a member of his family, he had the ultimate responsibility for your well-being. If more guys would follow that, and women would follow that system, I think it would be a lot better.
But he is the exception, not the norm. The norm is the guy who takes the head job at Drive By You, and all he cares about is getting successful as quickly as possible.
And also, he doesn't want to be at odds with the person giving him that paycheck. I mean, Dean Smith became such a legend. He had the power to represent his kids. Rich Rodriguez in Michigan, he's trying to get established. You get at odds with the administration, your school, you get run out. But you win a few national championships like Dean, now you got some power and leverage.
Well, he was hung in effigy in his third year at the University of North Carolina, so it's not like he was given the golden spoon and said, go ahead and run this way. I think there's certain integrity, and I would disagree. I think a lot more coaches fall not at the level he is, but in that direction as opposed to the other way. Unfortunately, those at the bottom get most of the attention.
I agree with you, Bill. And as a coach, certainly myself self-serving to say this, but I think the most coaches do truly, the good ones do truly care about all the welfare of their athletes. But I do think there is somewhat of a disconnect between the NCAA and college coaches, more so than there needs to be. I think, again, it goes back to my earlier point that I think there has to be better communication. Coaches have to get involved and let the NCAA, this is really what's going on, this is what's frustrating, this is who's getting a competitive advantage, and get the coach. There's a level of mistrust. And you can see why sometimes, because there are some poor instances where coaches aren't doing the best thing for the student athlete, but I think the majority of them are. Let's eliminate that mistrust. Let's communicate better with the NCAA.
Let me say something for this man right here. Think of the ridiculous ruling of 20 hours a week. Okay. Now you're asking a coach 20 hours a week. You're asking a coach, basically he's got 4 hours a day. There are 24 hours in a day. You're telling a coach, do not be involved with those kids in the other 20 hours. How about if the coach says, you know, I want to see that this kid's in class. I'd love to go over to his room at night to see if he's got the proper study. I want to make sure he's eating properly. He can't do it. Why would you put in a rule that takes away his opportunity to be a leader, as opposed to putting a rule in and saying, hey, let's work
because not all coaches have the best of intentions. Not all coaches want to make sure that kid is doing the proper things. Most coaches, in fact, could be argued, have only one priority, and that is winning games. And to the extent they can ask the kid to do that better, they'll do it.
You know, you win games, particularly over a long period of time, Brian. You win games when you put together that family where kids are helping you recruit other kids because they've had a great relationship at your university, and where your parents of kids that you brought in are helping to get the next kid. That coach that's on the short streak, he may win, but he will not have a program. He will have a team, but he will never have a program.
But you and I can both name a couple of coaches who have won here They've worn out their welcome, been basically run out of town. The cheating has followed them. They go to the next spot, win there, go to the next spot, win there.
I fault the NCAA on that particular respect. Why would a coach who's involved in a penalty, an egregious penalty at a university, be allowed to go somewhere else and coach and automatically be eligible?
But once again, you know, the NCAA is the president's. The second president, the president who hires the coach who's under a cloud, shouldn't do that. But he does it, or she does
because he wants to win, because somebody is putting pressure on him to
I want to
raise
go back
money
to
in the
your
athletic
original question
department.
in terms of who should represent the kids, because everybody deserves at least a public defender. And it really should fall upon the media, because we should be able to recognize this system is broken.
But most don't. Most guys in the media have a financial incentive to kind of not rock the boat.
To not rock the boat, but it's even worse than that, Brian, because what they do now is we go monitor some 17-year-old kid from some dysfunctional situation, and then we put out a story about what unethical thing he did so he could get to this college opportunity.
Right.
I mean,
Reggie Bush being a classic example.
Reggie Bush,
everybody wanted Reggie Bush to give back his Heisman. Nobody turned to Pete Carroll and said, give back $1.
But a bunch of these kids from terrible situations. I know a kid personally who his freshman and sophomore year did nothing in school because he was in one of the worst situations in the world. The school fixed his grades so that 2 years later he could go off to college and take advantage of this opportunity. The NCAA, the media, to expose this kid and to come down on him, oh, they broke these rules, that's garbage. It's BS.
Let me get to another question. This one comes from viewer Joseph. I like this one. He asks, is there a face to the NCAA? I have never, he writes, seen media coverage challenging or questioning a live person on NCAA rulings. Is there some unwritten rule that the media can't interview the people responsible for college sports?
Well, I think part of this too, and again, you know, you get experience as a college coach and understand the way the system works. You know, when you have a violation, recruiting violations or what have you, you go in front of the NCAA Committee on Infractions. These are a group of people that truly, I think, have the best interests of the student athletes at heart. They're not involved. They're not NCAA employees.
Do you really believe that, or do they have, or is their primary objective to make sure that the system is self-sustaining?
I'm talking about the committee now, the people that make the decisions. I think where their issues are, I think sometimes the people that are investigating truly don't know the ins and outs of college athletics, and so they're going in there kind of blind and not knowing exactly this is what's happening. And I think there is a little bit of disconnect there. I think the committee tries to do the best job, but the coaches, there's frustrating when there's not always the same.
Brian, here's something I recommended to the NCAA when Miles Brand was alive, and you would be a great moderator for this. You have the NCAA Final Four. You have incredible media attention from all over the world there in every major area of the United States. And I said there should be, on Sunday, in between games, a major NCAA forum there. Okay? And let the press, in effect, ask the questions right to Miles Brand. They don't. And these are the kind of things. And I said, Miles, you want to get the message out. What is Title IX? How does it affect the distribution of money? What are we doing in regard to rules and regulations?
The only time we ever see an NCAA person is when the person across from them starts by saying, great job by your committee.
Bryant, that's the media's fault. Because in the 90s, when the 1A people said, we're not going to have one school, one vote, we're not going to have convention governance, we're going to go to all these committees and conference-based, we're not going to meet in public. You know, there used to be an NCAA convention, media were in the room, media asked people questions. The media did not say a word.
By not being out front, they simply engage more suspicion of what they're doing.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you
that
they're doing it
wrong. Go to the NCAA and say, hey, we'll put this thing, or somebody, we'll put this thing on TV. We're going to have the media there, and we're going to have
the NCAA rule book? As a college coach, to recruit at this level, you take a recruiting test every May, which is a fine idea. But there's so many rules that the test only covers 2 sections. It's an open book rule, open book test. So if you can read, you can pass the test. It's this thick.
434 pages.
It's this thick, and there's so many rules that are ambiguous and that don't really relate to what they need to shorten it down to where everybody truly understands the rule and again gets the true cheaters in college athletics.
Another viewer, Chris, asks a question, a pretty good one. He says, okay, if they're students at the basketball and football players, if they're students, why not let them be treated as such? Other students can monetize their skills in college. Computer science student can write a money-making program. Business student can take a well-paying internship. Music student can play clubs on the weekends. Why bar the athlete from making money off the very activity for which he was brought to the school?
Walter Byers invented the modern NCAA, and he called it a plantation in a book. He called the athletes are enslaved. They want them beholden to the NCAA so they can make this money, and so they've come up with a list of rules to keep them enslaved.
I really disagree with that completely.
Walter Byers.
And I know Walter Byers extremely well.
He wrote it.
I was a student athlete. Okay, every guy that I played with.
Good one. Went to the Final Four too. Let it be said.
And all my guys that I played with, and most of the kids that I've known throughout all of these years, have improved themselves by being involved with intercollegiate athletics. They've improved themselves compared to what their parents were, and so I think that intercollegiate athletics is way on the positive side as opposed to the negative. What we have to do now, though, is we're in different times. And so consequently, I think we have to look at intercollegiate athletics in different ways, as you do in every other phase of life today.
And what's the reason we have rules? Is so you have a level playing field. If you don't have a set of rules, and again, I think you got to streamline a little bit. It's going to be the wild, wild west. You've got to have
right now
a set
the
of
rules simply seem to exist only to increase the profits.
Well, and I think there's the money part is an added dimension that is.
It drives everything, Rich.
Sure it does, but I think you have
to warps everything.
To make college athletics professionals in that respect. I think it's going to get worse. It'll exacerbate the problem.
And I think you can only level the playing fields for those people who have a field. All right, Vanderbilt is never going to dominate the SEC like Alabama. Vanderbilt has no business being in the same league.
Nor any interest in doing so.
Exactly. And so, my alma mater, Wake Forest, has no business being in the same league with a Clemson to play football, okay? And so I think to level the playing field, you really are going to have to create this upper level of teams that do have that capacity, and they're going to have sports-specific rules and regulations for them that wouldn't necessarily be the same for Hampton University.
But the important thing is they are going to have rules and regulations, and those same questions: who's cheating, who's not, who gets the money, who doesn't, who decides all that. Those same questions are going to exist. We shouldn't fool ourselves. In any super division, any independent group, top 60, top 80, as long as we've got these dollars, we're not going to be without the question of how do they get distributed.
Makes me mindful of a disturbing quote. A guy once said, "The future's just like the present, only longer."
And more expensive.
Guys, thanks so very much. That'll have to be the last word in our Real Sports Overtime. Again, on behalf of Billy Packer, Rich Rodriguez, Jason Whitlock, Jeffrey Orleans, I'm Bryant Gumbel. Thank you very much for joining us, and good night.